Good evening, everybody. This is Dr. Serge. So today, let's talk about a really fascinating topic, epigenetics. It is fascinating because this is the field actually that I graduated in. I wrote a thesis on epigenetics for my PhD. So that's a topic that I'm really familiar about. So let's talk a little bit about this because there's more and more research and evidence showing that exposure to different things in the womb impacts the babies later on during their life. It can be decades later, actually, and can affect their health conditions. One of the papers that I came across is this prenatal exposure to the Dutch famine and disease in later life, an overview. So in that paper, they found that when the moms were starving, didn't have enough food, it will impact the baby. Of course, the baby will be born with lower weight. And later on, 40, 50 years later, they had a higher risk of heart disease, for example, or being sick of all kinds of problems. So it may not be evident in the moment, but it can impact really the body later on, 40, 50, 60 years, like I said. So really fascinating. So that was in 2005, and we didn't really understand what exactly was the mechanism behind this, but let's get back to it in a few minutes. And then there's two other papers that I came across. Exercise during pregnancies mitigates negative effects of parental obesity or metabolic function in adult mouse offspring. And the other one is really similar to effects of maternal or paternal exercise of offspring metabolism. So they found that this is in animals, in mice specifically. They found that when the parents, the mom or the dad, exercise and then conceive, the baby can be impacted by that when the baby is born, the mouse, a baby, of course. So that's really fascinating. So at the end of the day, these three papers indicate that whatever is going on with the mom during pregnancy can directly impact the child when the child is born and later on during the life. And not just the mom, but this last paper showed that the dad as well can impact the health of the future child. So how does that work? So it all comes down to epigenetics. We know our DNA, if you take one single molecule of DNA, it's about 7 feet long, okay? So we have a lot of DNA. Okay, and that DNA 7 feet is pretty long, like I said. So it has to be compacted inside our tiny cells. So what happened is the cells has a mechanisms. So it really wraps the DNA around thousands and thousands of times to really compact the DNA into the cells. And the compaction is done by proteins, and those proteins are called histones. So there's 4 types of histones. Okay, and the fascinating thing with histones is there's a tail that extends out of the DNA. We call it a tail, actually. It can be 20, 30, 40 amino acids long. And those tails, they are made of amino acids, which is the building blocks of protein. They can be modified by different elements called like methylations, acetylations, somalations, and so on and so on. So those modifications give us the language of the epigenetics, okay? I do not believe that genes dictate our future. It does not. They do not. In some cases, there may be there's some rare genetic conditions, but 99% of the time, it's not genetics, it's epigenetics. For example, some people will talk about cancer genes. There's no such a thing as cancer genes. We know today, for example, the breast cancer gene, the BRCA1, the BRCA2, doesn't really dictate your future. Some people with the gene mutations will have breast cancer. Some people with the mutation won't have breast cancer. And some people without the mutation have the risk of having breast cancer. So genes don't dictate what will happen in the future. However, epigenetics does. Epigenetics comes from our lifestyle. So when I did my thesis, my PhD, so I was looking at the function of resveratrol, which is this molecule from wine. And there's a lot of science today to show that it's one of the most potent antioxidants. Resveratrol is epigenetic modifications of the histones. So it does change the language of the histone cells. So lifestyles impact epigenetics, and epigenetics modifications all transfer from generation to generation, and so on and so on. I've seen so many people over the years, they will come and they will tell me, man, my dad, my grandfather, my great-grandfather were all obese, and I'm obese too. That's just our genes. That's not. It's the epigenetic modifications that transfer. If you have the epigenetic modifications of being obese, that can be transferred to the offsprings, like we just talked about in these 3 different papers. But the good news is there's a way to change the modifications of those cells through our lifestyle choices. So eat cleaner and handle your stress. Don't eat sugar. Don't eat bad fat, trans fat. Eat more protein, for example. Do acupuncture, run, working out. All those different things that can impact our lifestyles change our epigenetics modifications on our histone cells. And that can be actually transferred to kids and kids and kids. And so on. So I don't know if you guys heard of the Pottenger's cats. There was a study done in the 30s by Dr. Pottenger's using cats, and he bred and fed generations of cats. I think it was 4 or 5 generations. They would have 2 groups of cats. One group of cats were fed the natural diet, raw milk and raw food. And the other group of cats were fed processed food, the food that the Americans would eat back in the days. And he found that after the 5th generations of feeding the processed food diet, those cats would stop reproducing. And the offspring born from those cats were all sick. They had diabetes, arthritis, cancer, chronic issues, inflammation. Okay, and this is what we see today in this country. We are heading towards the 5th generations of kids being born of people who have been fed on processed foods. And if you look at kids born today, they are sick. They are diagnosed with high cholesterol, high blood pressure. They are put on antidepressants at 10, 11, 12 years old, and they are sicker than ever. One of the main reasons is those modifications got transferred from generation to generations. So if you have genes, or not genes, but modifications for obesity, of course, the kids will be born with it and will have issues maybe with insulin, with leptin, and will eat all those processed food, all those cravings, and so on. The good news is Dr. Pottenger's, what he did is he took those kids, not those kids, those cats, and he fed them the actual natural diet they were supposed to be fed, raw milk, raw meat. And it took 7 generations of feeding those sick kittens to get back to normal health. So the good news is there's a way to reverse our kids' health and situations. And we do that through lifestyle options and diet specifically. So our kids today need to be fed a high-fat diet, low carbs. If you think about it, the first food they recommend to introduce to babies is starch, it's sugar, it's carbs. This is totally the opposite of what we need to do. So babies should be introduced eggs, liver, raw milk, avocados, healthy fats. And when you do that, you reverse the epigenetic modifications in the cells, in the DNA. That help those kids to be healthier. There's always a way to do it. There's hope for children today to get healthier, and we do that through education and diet. So I hope this makes sense. So this is what I wanted to say about epigenetics, which is the answers to our health crisis right now. Genes have nothing to do with that. Like I said, maybe some rare cases, but everything can be reversed. So thank you for watching tonight. God bless you.